Sofia Reyna had learned, in 3 years of service, that the Ashford-Wynn estate had one rule above all others: see everything, say nothing. The walls were glass. The staff were invisible. That was the arrangement, and Sofia had made peace with it, until the night she wasn't supposed to be in the East Wing at all. She'd only meant to retrieve a forgotten tablet. Instead, her phone camera, still recording from an earlier errand, caught 11 seconds that would unmake a dynasty. Catherine Ashford-Wynn, the woman whose name sat on skyscrapers and stock exchanges, standing far too close to her own son-in-law, in a robe that wasn't meant for business. Sofia didn't move, didn't breathe. She simply watched the recording finish, save, and sit in her pocket like a live wire. By morning, she was still the maid who refilled the coffee and pressed the linens. But she was also the only person in that glass house who now knew exactly what it was hiding, and exactly what silence could cost her, or earn her. The Ashford-Wynn estate rose out of the hillside like something designed to be photographed rather than lived in, glass walls stacked in clean, unforgiving lines, every room visible from another room, as if privacy had been engineered out of the architecture on purpose. Sofia Reyna moved through it the way she moved through most things, quietly, efficiently, unseen. She had learned the choreography of invisibility down to the second: when to enter a room, when to disappear from it, how to carry a tray of coffee past a boardroom call without a single head turning her way. 3 years in this house had taught her that the staff were furniture with legs, and furniture did not get noticed unless it broke. Catherine Ashford-Wynn ran her empire the same way she ran her household, with absolute, glittering control. Her name sat on buildings Sofia would never be allowed inside as a guest. Her voice, even at 7 in the morning over a single cup of black coffee, carried the same command it did in front of a boardroom. Nothing about her seemed capable of cracking. Down the hall, Claire Ashford-Wynn and her husband Marcus lived the kind of marriage magazines like to feature: sun-drenched breakfasts, easy laughter, matching morning routines that looked, from the outside, like proof that love and money could coexist without corroding each other. Sofia refilled their orange juice and cleared their plates and told herself, as she always did, that whatever happened behind that glass was none of her business. She believed that mostly because she had never had a reason not to. Not yet. The call had come just after 11. Catherine's voice through the intercom, clipped and businesslike, asking Sofia to bring a pot of tea to the East Wing study. Late-night strategy sessions weren't unusual in this house. Empires didn't run on business hours, and Sofia had delivered enough midnight coffee to stop questioning why the lights stayed on so long after everyone else had gone to bed. Her phone was still recording when she reached the study door. She'd left it filming earlier, capturing a delivery note for the housekeeper's log, an old habit from a house that measured trust in receipts. She hadn't thought to stop it. She hadn't thought about it at all. The door was open a few inches, enough for the tea tray's silver edge to catch the light spilling out. Enough for Sofia to see Catherine standing far closer to Marcus than any strategy session required, her robe slipping from one shoulder, his hand resting where a son-in-law's hand had no business resting. Neither of them noticed the door. Neither of them noticed her. Sofia didn't remember deciding to stay still. Her body simply obeyed some older, wiser instinct, the one that had kept her invisible for 3 years, and she stood frozen in the hallway for what felt like an hour but was, when she checked later, only 11 seconds. She set the tea tray down without a word and left the way she'd come, her heart slamming against her ribs the entire walk back to the staff quarters. It wasn't until she was alone, door locked, phone trembling in her hand, that she realized what she was holding. Not a video. A detonator. Sofia watched the 11 seconds 4 times before she made herself stop. Each time, she told herself it was to be sure of what she'd seen, sure it wasn't some trick of shadow and bad lighting and her own exhaustion. But by the 4th viewing, certainty wasn't the problem anymore. The problem was that the footage was real, and it was sitting in her phone, and she had no idea what a person was supposed to do with something like that. She lay awake turning it over the way she once turned over unpaid bills, searching for an angle that made the number smaller, a version of the truth she could afford. If she said nothing, she stayed exactly what she'd always been: invisible, safe, employed. If she said something to Claire, to anyone, she became the maid who destroyed a marriage and a household in one sentence, and households like this one did not thank the messenger. They erased her. And beneath both of those thoughts sat a third one she was ashamed to even let form fully. That 11 seconds of footage might be worth more than 3 years of her salary combined, if she was cold enough to use it that way. She wasn't sure yet if she was. The apartment above the garage felt smaller than usual that night, the ceiling pressing lower, the silence louder. Somewhere in the main house, Catherine was probably sleeping in that same untouched composure she wore every morning, and Claire was probably sleeping beside a husband she trusted completely, and Sofia was the only person in the entire estate lying awake with the true shape of things. She locked her phone. She didn't delete anything. In the days that followed, Sofia noticed what she had never let herself notice before, the pattern hiding inside the routine. Catherine's strategy sessions fell on the exact nights Claire flew out for foundation galas. Marcus's later rivals' home lined up, almost too neatly, with Catherine's early ones. Once she knew where to look, the evidence seemed to surface everywhere, small and damning. A second wine glass in the study sink, a text notification on Catherine's tablet that Marcus's name shouldn't have been attached to, the particular way Catherine's voice softened by half a register whenever he entered a room. Sofia told herself she wasn't investigating. She was simply present, the way she'd always been present, moving through the house with her tray and her silence. Except now her eyes stayed open a beat longer, her steps slowed a fraction outside certain doors. The estate's cameras covered every hallway, every entrance, every inch of glass, but they had never been built to notice a maid noticing things. That was the blind spot built into her invisibility, and for the first time, she used it on purpose. It was dangerous work, though she rarely let herself frame it that way. Catherine had a way of looking at staff that felt like a scan, quick, assessing, gone in a second. And twice that week Sofia felt that gaze linger half a beat too long, as if some instinct in the older woman had registered a shift in the air without knowing its source. Sofia kept her expression arranged, her hands steady on the tray, her voice pitched exactly as flat and pleasant as it had always been. But inside, something had changed. She wasn't just carrying a secret anymore. She was collecting one. The first test was small enough to deny, even to herself. Sofia asked for a Sunday off, something she hadn't done in over a year, and instead of the usual clip negotiation with a house manager, Catherine herself waved it through without so much as a question. Sofia told herself it meant nothing. Employers granted days off. It happened. But then came the second test and the third. A request to swap a double shift. A quiet mention that the water pressure in the staff quarters had been weak for months. Things that once would have vanished into the house's long list of unaddressed complaints were suddenly, mysteriously, handled within days. Sofia hadn't said a word about what she knew. She hadn't needed to. Some current beneath the surface of every interaction had shifted, and she began to suspect that Catherine felt it too, a faint unease whenever their eyes met, a new carefulness in how she spoke to the maid who used to be wallpaper. It frightened Sofia, how quickly she adjusted to the feeling. There was a version of power that didn't announce itself, that lived entirely in the space between what was known and what was said aloud, and she was learning to occupy that space without flinching. She still curtsied her voice into the same deferential shape. She still lowered her eyes at the right moments. But underneath, something had reorganized itself, some old hierarchy quietly inverting without either woman naming it. She didn't know yet what she wanted to do with what she was holding. But for the first time in 3 years, Sofia understood that she was no longer the only one in that house who was afraid. Claire noticed it first as a smell, her husband's cologne mixed with something floral that wasn't hers, lingering on a jacket he'd claimed he'd worn to a client dinner alone. She told herself it was nothing, the same way she'd told herself the late nights were nothing, the same way she'd explained away the strange, charged silences that fell over the breakfast table whenever her mother and Marcus were in the same room for too long. Claire had built her entire adult life on the assumption that her family, whatever its flaws, did not lie to her. That assumption was beginning, quietly, to crack. Catherine felt the cracks too, though she would never have named them that. She caught herself repeating instructions to her assistant, misplacing details she once held effortlessly, snapping at a board member over something trivial enough that 3 people in the room exchanged glances afterward. The armor she had worn for 30 years, the one that made her untouchable in negotiations, unreadable in scandal, immovable in crisis, had a hairline fracture running through it now, invisible to everyone except the woman wearing it. At dinner one evening, Claire asked, lightly, almost as a joke, whether her mother and Marcus had been spending a lot of time together lately with the merger. Catherine's answer came a half-second too late, her smile a half-degree too fixed, and for the briefest moment the temperature of the room seemed to drop by several degrees. Sofia, refilling water glasses at the sideboard, felt it too, the tremor beneath the marble calm, the sense of something enormous straining quietly against its own foundation. No one said anything more, but something in the house had begun, almost imperceptibly, to lean. The choice arrived faster than Sofia expected, and it didn't announce itself as a choice at all. It arrived as an envelope. Catherine found her in the laundry room, alone, and set it on the folding table between them without a word. Inside was more money than Sofia had seen in one place in her life, along with a single unspoken sentence hanging in the air. This is for your silence, and for your discretion, and for making sure whatever you think you saw stays exactly where it is. Catherine didn't say any of that aloud. She didn't have to. Her eyes, usually so composed, held something close to pleading, buried under the practiced steel. Sofia stared at the envelope for a long moment. It would be enough to leave, not just this house, but the version of her life that required rooms like this one, envelopes like this one, silence like this one. It would be enough to become someone else entirely, somewhere Catherine Ashford-Wynn's name meant nothing. But she thought of Claire, refilling her own water glass at breakfast, laughing at something Marcus said, utterly unaware that she was the only person in her own home who didn't know the truth of it. She thought of 3 years of being furniture, of being talked over and around and through, and how the envelope on the table was just another way of being handled instead of heard. Sofia didn't take the money. She didn't refuse it either, not yet, not out loud. She simply looked up at Catherine and said, quietly, that she needed time to think. It was the first time in 3 years she had made this house wait on her. Sofia never sent the footage. In the end, she didn't have to. Claire found it herself, not the video, but its shadow, a trail of deleted messages Marcus had forgotten to clear on a shared cloud account, dates and times that matched too precisely to be innocent. She sat with it for a full day before she said anything, the same way Sofia once had, turning the wreckage over and over as if enough turning might change its shape. It didn't. When she finally confronted them, she did it in the dining room, at the exact table where they'd all performed family for years, because some instinct told her the truth deserved to happen in the same place the lie had. Marcus tried to explain. Catherine, for the first time in Sofia's memory, didn't try to control the room at all. She simply stood there, stripped of every practiced composure, and let her daughter see exactly what she'd built her empire on top of. By the time Claire left the house that night, someone, no one would ever fully trace who, had already leaked enough details to a financial reporter for the story to break within 48 hours. Ashford-Wynn stock dropped before the markets even opened the next morning. Board members who had spent years praising Catherine's unshakable judgment now used words like personal conduct and fiduciary concerns in statements clearly drafted by lawyers. Sofia watched it all from the edges of the house, the way she'd always watched everything, except now the invisibility felt different. She hadn't lit the match. She'd simply stopped pretending the fire wasn't already burning. The board moved with the same cold efficiency Catherine had once used against her competitors. Within a week, an emergency vote stripped her of her chairmanship, the language in the press release carefully bloodless, stepping back to focus on personal matters, while every financial outlet ran the real story beneath the euphemism. 30 years of dynastic control dissolved in a single afternoon meeting Catherine wasn't even invited to attend in person. Marcus fared worse, in the way men without their own foundations always do when the structure beneath them collapses. Claire filed for divorce within days, and without her name and her family's backing, The business ventures he'd always taken credit for revealed themselves as exactly what they'd been, hers, or her mother's, on loan to him the whole time. His calls went unanswered. His old friends grew suddenly busy. The tailored life he'd worn like it was earned turned out to be borrowed down to the thread. Claire moved through the wreckage of her marriage and her family with a hollowed, exhausted clarity, fielding lawyers and reporters, and the particular cruelty of mutual friends who suddenly had opinions about things they knew nothing about. She barely spoke to her mother. She didn't speak to Marcus at all. Sofia kept working through all of it, refilling water glasses in a house that had gone quiet in a new and permanent way, the marble floors and glass walls doing nothing now to disguise how empty the place had become. No one asked her what she knew. No one seemed to remember, in the chaos, that she had been standing in the hallway that first night at all. She let them forget. It suited her for now. Sofia deleted the footage the week she left the estate for good. She didn't need it anymore, and some part of her had never wanted to be the kind of person who needed it, a woman defined by what she held over someone else rather than what she'd built for herself. She watched the 11 seconds one final time, not for proof, not for power, but almost as a farewell, and then let it disappear from her phone the way the old version of her had disappeared from that house. Claire, in the strange arithmetic of the wreckage, was the one who found her afterward, not to accuse, but to thank her, quietly, for never selling the truth even when she'd had every reason to. It was the closest thing to an apology either of them could offer for everything the house had cost them both, in different currencies. Catherine rebuilt something smaller, further from cameras and headlines, learning slowly what it meant to be ordinary in rooms that no longer arranged themselves around her. Marcus disappeared into the kind of anonymity reserved for men who turn out to have been furniture themselves, propped up by a name that was never his. Sofia took a small apartment in the city, plain and unremarkable, and found work that had nothing to do with trays or uniforms or invisible footsteps in glass hallways. She still moved quietly through rooms sometimes, old habits outliving their usefulness, but she noticed now when people looked at her and she let them. The glass house still stood on the hill, empty of the people who'd once filled it with secrets. Sofia never looked back at it. She didn't need to. She had already carried the only thing worth keeping out the door.